The rain hammered against the windshield as Marcus Chen pulled his delivery truck to the curb outside the towering glass mansion. He checked the address twice, squinting through the storm at the imposing structure that seemed to pierce the Seattle skyline like a crystal spear. This wasn't his usual route, but when dispatch called about an emergency prescription delivery to Mercer Island, he couldn't say no to the overtime pay. His daughter Emma's ballet lessons weren't going to pay for themselves. Marcus grabbed the insulated medical bag and sprinted toward the front entrance, his work boots splashing through puddles that reflected the mansion's cold LA lighting. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. He'd been a pharmacist for 12 years before circumstances forced him into delivery work, but he still recognized the labels on these packages. Specialized cardiac medications, the kind that kept people alive when their hearts decided to quit without warning. The doorbell echoed through what sounded like a cathedral. Minutes passed, he rang again, then knocked, the sound seeming impossibly small against the massive oak doors. Something felt wrong. The prescription was marked urgent, time-sensitive, and no one was answering at a house that probably cost more than he'd make in 10 lifetimes. Marcus tried the handle, unlocked. He stepped into a foyer that belonged in a museum, all marble floors and contemporary art that probably cost more than his annual salary. The silence was deafening, except for the storm raging outside, and something else, something that made his pulse quicken. Labored breathing, coming from somewhere deeper in the house. Following the sound, he moved through rooms that showcased wealth beyond imagination. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Lake Washington, while sculptures and paintings created a maze of artistic excess. The breathing grew louder, more distressed, leading him toward what appeared to be a home office. She was on the floor behind an antique desk, her designer suit wrinkled, and her usually perfect blonde hair spread across the Persian rug like spilled silk. Even in distress, Alexandra Whitmore was unmistakably beautiful, the kind of woman whose face graced business magazines and charity gala invitations. But right now, she was clutching her chest, her face pale, and her lips tinged with blue. Marcus dropped to his knees beside her, his medical training kicking in despite years away from clinical practice. Her pulse was rapid and irregular, her breathing shallow. Classic signs of cardiac distress, possibly a heart attack. He glanced at the prescription bag, still clutched in his hand, then back at her face. "Ma'am, can you hear me? I'm Marcus, I have your medication." Her eyes fluttered open, striking green even in distress. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper. "Pills, in the kitchen." Marcus looked around the office, taking in the chaos. Papers were scattered across the desk, some bearing what looked like legal letterheads. A laptop sat open, its screen still glowing with what appeared to be financial documents. But none of that mattered now. He needed to get her stabilized and call for help. "I'm going to help you sit up," he said, slipping his arm behind her shoulders. "Where exactly are the pills in the kitchen?" "Counter, by the coffee maker." He helped her to a sitting position against the desk, noting how her breathing eased slightly with the change in posture. "I'm going to get those pills and call 911. Don't try to move." The kitchen was as impressive as the rest of the house, with professional-grade appliances that looked like they'd never been used. He found the pills exactly where she'd said, recognizing them immediately as nitroglycerin tablets. When he returned, Alexandra was still conscious but clearly struggling. "Under your tongue," he instructed, placing the tiny pill carefully. "This should help with the chest pain." While the medication took effect, Marcus called 911, giving them the address and a clear description of her symptoms. The dispatcher assured him paramedics were en route, but with the storm, it could be 20 minutes or more. "Stay with me," Alexandra whispered, her hand finding his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong for someone in cardiac distress. "Please don't leave me alone." Marcus settled beside her on the floor, monitoring her pulse and breathing. "I'm not going anywhere." "What's your name?" "Alexandra." Alexandra Whitmore. Even struggling for breath, she managed to maintain a certain dignity. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Someone in a uniform maybe. Not someone who knows what they're doing." She paused, studying his face. You're not just a delivery driver, are you? Marcus hesitated. He'd learned to keep his past simple, especially with wealthy clients who might pity or judge his circumstances. I used to be a pharmacist. Before what? The question hung in the air between them. Outside, thunder rolled across the lake, and the lights flickered briefly. Alexandra's color was improving slightly, but Marcus could tell she was still in significant distress. He found himself answering more honestly than he'd intended. Before my wife died, and I had to take care of my daughter full-time. Pharmacy hours don't exactly accommodate single parenting, especially when you can't afford quality childcare. Alexandra's expression softened. How old is your daughter? 10, Emma. She's at her friend's house tonight, probably wondering why I'm not home yet. Marcus checked his watch, realizing he should probably call to let her know he'd be late. But something about this moment, sitting on the floor of a stranger's mansion while storm raged outside, made normal concerns feel distant. Tell me about her, Alexandra said, her breathing becoming steadier. Emma. Marcus found himself smiling despite the circumstances. She's incredible. Smart as a whip, wants to be a dancer, takes after her mom in all the best ways. His expression grew more serious. She's been through a lot. Cancer took her mother 2 years ago, and it's been just the two of us ever since. That must be difficult. Some days are harder than others. But Emma's resilient, stronger than I am, most of the time. He studied Alexandra's face, noting that the blue tinge was fading from her lips. What about you? Any family? Alexandra's laugh was bitter. Depends on your definition of family. I have relatives who show up when they need something, business associates who pretend to care about my well-being, and enough hangers-on to fill this house twice over. But people who actually care whether I live or die. She shook her head. That's a much shorter list. The vulnerability in her voice surprised Marcus. Here was a woman who commanded boardrooms and made headlines, reduced to the same fundamental human need everyone shared, the desire not to be alone when facing mortality. That's why you asked me to stay, he said, understanding. Pathetic, isn't it? One of the richest women in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm begging a stranger not to abandon me on my office floor. Marcus shifted position, making himself more comfortable on the expensive rug. It's not pathetic. It's human. Money doesn't make loneliness hurt any less. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, listening to the storm and the distant sound of approaching sirens. Alexandra seemed to be breathing easier, though Marcus continued to monitor her pulse periodically. The nitroglycerin was doing its job, but she clearly needed more comprehensive medical attention. Marcus, she said suddenly, her voice stronger now. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you come inside? Most delivery people would have left the medication at the door, maybe called the number on file. Marcus considered the question. Honestly, something felt wrong. The urgent medication, no answer at the door, but the house was clearly occupied. My gut told me someone was in trouble. Your gut was right. Alexandra studied his face in the dim light filtering in from the hallway. You could have just left. Completed your delivery, gone home to your daughter. Instead you potentially saved my life. Why? The question touched something deep in Marcus's chest, a place he'd kept carefully guarded since Lisa's death. Because everyone deserves to have someone show up when they're scared. Because no one should have to face their worst moments alone. He paused. Because if it were Emma someday, I'd hope a stranger would care enough to help. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights beginning to flash through the tall windows. Alexandra's hand tightened on his wrist. I need to tell you something, she said urgently. Before they get here. Tonight wasn't random. The stress, the heart episode. I've been getting death threats. Someone wants me dead, Marcus. And now you're involved. Before Marcus could respond, the paramedics burst through the front door, their equipment and urgent voices filling the previously quiet mansion. As they worked to stabilize Alexandra and prepare her for transport, Marcus found himself pushed to the periphery, just another bystander in what was clearly a well-rehearsed medical emergency. But as they loaded her onto the stretcher, Alexandra caught his eye one final time. Find me, she whispered. Memorial Hospital. There's more I need to tell you. More you need to know. And then she was gone, leaving Marcus standing alone in the mansion's foyer, holding an empty medical bag, and wondering what he'd just gotten himself into. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, everything had changed. The simple delivery run that should have taken 20 minutes had become something else entirely, something that would alter the course of both their lives in ways neither could yet imagine. Marcus looked around the empty mansion one more time, noting details he'd missed in the emergency. Family photos were notably absent, replaced by awards and business accolades. The artwork was impressive but cold, lacking the personal touches that made a house a home. This was a showcase, not a sanctuary, and suddenly Alexandra's loneliness made perfect sense. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Dad, are you okay? You're really late." Marcus typed back quickly. "Sorry, sweetheart, had an emergency at work. On my way home now. Love you." But as he walked back to his delivery truck, Marcus knew he wasn't just going home. He was carrying the weight of a stranger's trust, the echo of her whispered warning, and the growing certainty that tomorrow would bring complications he couldn't yet imagine. Alexandra Whitmore had secrets that someone was willing to kill for, and somehow, a simple act of human kindness had made him part of her dangerous world. The rain was finally beginning to ease as Marcus drove through the empty streets toward his modest apartment across the lake. But his mind remained in that marble foyer, replaying every detail of the evening. The scattered papers on her desk, the fear in her eyes, the way she gripped his hand like a lifeline. He thought about Emma, safe at her friend's house, probably asleep by now and blissfully unaware that her father had just stumbled into something that felt much bigger than a medical emergency. Whatever Alexandra Whitmore wanted to tell him at the hospital, whatever secrets had put her life in danger, Marcus had the sinking feeling that his simple life was about to become extraordinarily complicated. The fluorescent lights of Memorial Hospital cast harsh shadows across the waiting room as Marcus paced between rows of uncomfortable plastic chairs. 3 hours had passed since the ambulance doors had closed behind Alexandra, and he still couldn't explain to himself why he was here instead of home with Emma. His daughter had texted twice more, accepting his explanation about working late, but the guilt gnawed at him nonetheless. A doctor in surgical scrubs finally approached, clipboard in hand, and exhaustion etched across his weathered face. "Are you here for Miss Whitmore?" "Yes, I'm Marcus Chen. I found her," called the ambulance. "Dr. Patterson." The man extended his hand briefly. "She's stable now, but it was touch and go for a while. Severe cardiac arrhythmia brought on by extreme stress. Without your quick thinking with the nitroglycerin, we might have lost her." He paused, studying Marcus with curious eyes. "She's been asking for you specifically." "That's unusual, especially given that she's refused to see anyone else, including several people who claim to be family members." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of family members?" "Cousins, I believe, very insistent, very well dressed. They seemed surprised when I told them she'd specifically requested no visitors, except for a Marcus Chen." Dr. Patterson lowered his voice. "Between you and me, she seemed frightened when their names were mentioned. Is there something I should know about her situation?" The weight of Alexandra's whispered warning settled heavier on Marcus's shoulders. "Death threats. Someone wants me dead." "Doctor, has hospital security been notified about any potential threats to her safety?" Dr. Patterson's expression grew more serious. "What kind of threats?" "She mentioned receiving death threats before her cardiac episode. I think someone might want to hurt her. I'll contact security immediately. In the meantime, she's in room 412. She's been sedated, but she's lucid." The doctor hesitated. "Mr. Chen, I don't know what your relationship is with Miss Whitmore, but she seems to trust you. That's rare for her, according to the nurses who've dealt with her before. She's been a patient here several times over the years, always alone, always refusing visitors. Tonight was different." Marcus thanked the doctor and made his way toward the elevators, his mind racing with questions. The hospital corridors felt endless, filled with the familiar antiseptic smell that brought back memories of Lisa's final weeks. He'd hoped never to spend another night in a place like this, yet here he was, drawn by a promise to a woman he'd known for less than 4 hours. Room 412 was private, spacious and filled with the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Alexandra lay propped against pillows, her color much improved, but her eyes alert and focused on the door as if she'd been waiting for him. Someone had brushed her hair and provided her with a hospital gown that somehow looked elegant on her slender frame. "You came," she said, her voice still weak but carrying obvious relief. Marcus pulled a chair close to her bed. "I said I would. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a freight train, but alive." She managed a small smile. "Thanks to you. Dr. Patterson told me what you did, how quickly you recognized the symptoms and got me the medication. He said your medical knowledge probably saved my life. Anyone with basic first aid training would have done the same thing." "No, Marcus. Anyone with basic first aid training might have called 911 and waited. You stayed. You took care of me when I was terrified and alone." Her eyes grew more serious. "And now I owe you an explanation." Marcus settled back in the chair, sensing that whatever she was about to tell him would change everything. "The death threats you mentioned." "Among other things." Alexandra reached for a glass of water on her bedside table, her hand still slightly tremulous. "My name is Alexandra Whitmore, but what you probably don't know is that I'm the sole heir to Whitmore Industries. Shipping, real estate, technology investments. My grandfather built it from nothing, my father expanded it globally, and when he died 5 years ago, it all came to me. That's a lot of responsibility. It's also a lot of money. $12 billion to be exact."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
She watched his reaction carefully. "The problem is, I never wanted it. I wanted to be a teacher, maybe work with underprivileged kids, but family duty, legacy, all those things that rich families use to trap their children into predetermined lives." Marcus thought about his own daughter, how he wanted Emma to choose her own path regardless of their circumstances. "So you took over the company anyway?" "I had to. The will was very specific about succession, and there were too many people depending on the company for their livelihoods. But I've been systematically restructuring everything. Liquidating assets, preparing to establish a charitable foundation that would distribute the wealth to causes that actually matter." She paused, her expression growing darker. "That's where the problem started. Someone doesn't want you giving away the money." "Several someones, my cousins Daniel and Rebecca Whitmore, stand to inherit significant portions if something happens to me. They've been fighting the restructuring in court, claiming I'm mentally incompetent, trying to have me removed as CEO." Alexandra's voice grew bitter. "The death threats started 6 months ago, right after I announced the foundation plans publicly." Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to connect. "The people who showed up here tonight, claiming to be family, almost certainly Daniel and Rebecca. They've been circling like vultures ever since my father's death, waiting for their chance to control the empire." She reached into the drawer of her bedside table and pulled out a folded document. "This is why I needed to see you, Marcus. Why I couldn't let tonight end with just a thank you." He accepted the paper, noting the legal letterhead and official seals. As he read, his confusion deepened. "This is a will amendment, dated today. I had my lawyer bring it to the house this afternoon, along with witnesses. It's completely legal and binding." Alexandra watched his face as understanding dawned. "You're now named as the primary beneficiary of my estate, Marcus Chen. If something happens to me, everything goes to you and your daughter." Marcus stared at the document, the words seeming to swim on the page. "Alexandra, I can't. This is insane. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you risked your own safety to help a stranger. I know you stayed with me when I was scared. I know you've sacrificed your career to take care of your daughter after losing your wife." Her voice grew stronger, more determined. "Most importantly, I know you're not motivated by greed. You're exactly the kind of person who would use that money to make a real difference in the world. But $12 billion. I deliver prescriptions for a living. I drive a 10-year-old truck and live in a 2-bedroom apartment. This kind of money would destroy my life, not improve it." Alexandra shook her head. "Only if you let it. The foundation plans are already in place, Marcus. Legal frameworks, charitable targets, distribution methods. All it needs is someone trustworthy to oversee the transition. Someone who understands what it means to struggle, to lose someone you love, to worry about providing for your child. Marcus stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked the city lights. Below, Seattle sprawled in all directions, millions of people living their quiet lives, unaware that a conversation in a hospital room might be about to change everything. Why not just leave it to the foundation directly? Why involve me at all? Because foundations can be corrupted, boards can be bought, and good intentions can be perverted by people who know how to work the system. But a person, the right person, can make sure the money goes where it's supposed to go. She paused. And because I'm hoping I'll live long enough to work with you on making it happen. This isn't just about death, Marcus. It's about finding someone I can trust to help me fix the damage my family's wealth has caused. What kind of damage? Alexandra's expression grew pained. Environmental destruction from our shipping operations. Communities displaced by our real estate developments. Technology investments that prioritize profit over privacy. For 5 years I've been trying to undo decades of corporate greed, but I can't do it alone. The board fights me on everything. My cousins undermine my authority, and the lawyers find loopholes in every reform I try to implement. Marcus returned to his chair, the will still clutched in his hands. And you think I can help with that? I think you have something my family has never had. A moral compass that hasn't been corrupted by wealth and power. A perspective that comes from actually living in the real world, dealing with real problems. She leaned forward, her eyes intense despite her medical condition. Your wife died of cancer. How many times did you face insurance denials, treatment delays, financial stress that made everything worse? The question hit like a physical blow. Marcus remembered the fights with insurance companies, the mounting bills, the nights spent awake wondering how he'd pay for Emma's future while keeping up with Lisa's medical expenses. Too many times. The Whitmore Foundation could fund cancer research, provide free treatment, eliminate the financial barriers that prevent people from getting the care they need. But only if someone who's lived that nightmare is making the decisions. Alexandra's voice grew softer. I can't bring your wife back, Marcus. But maybe together we can prevent other families from going through what you and Emma experienced. Marcus stared at the document, seeing not just legal language but possibility. Emma's college fund, secure and guaranteed. Medical research that might save other families. Communities rebuilt instead of displaced. Environmental restoration instead of destruction. It was overwhelming and terrifying, and completely impossible to ignore. The death threats, he said quietly. If I'm involved in this, if your cousins find out about the will change, Emma becomes a target too. That's why I've already arranged for security. Personal protection for both of you, starting tonight. The team is discreet, professional and completely loyal to me rather than the company. They don't know about the will change, only that you're someone important to me who might be in danger. You've thought of everything. I've had to. This isn't a game, Marcus. There are billions of dollars at stake, and my cousins have already proven they're willing to use intimidation and legal manipulation to get what they want. I don't put murder past them, especially if they discover what I've done tonight. Marcus folded the will carefully, slipping it into his jacket pocket. I need time to think about this, to figure out how to explain any of it to Emma. Of course, but Marcus, please don't underestimate the danger. Even being here tonight, even being seen with me, puts you at risk. My cousins have investigators, people who watch my movements and report back. By morning they'll know about you. What are you suggesting? Come stay at the house, both you and Emma. It's secure, heavily monitored, and my security team can protect you there. Plus it would give us time to plan, to figure out how to restructure everything safely. Marcus thought about his modest apartment, Emma's school, their quiet life that was about to be turned upside down. She has friends, routines. I can't just uproot her because a stranger left her money she doesn't even know about. Then don't tell her about the money yet. Tell her you're helping someone who's in trouble, someone who needs a friend. Kids understand that kind of thing better than adults sometimes. The simplicity of it appealed to Marcus. Emma had always been drawn to helping others. volunteering at animal shelters, and insisting they donate toys to children's charities even when their own budget was tight. She'd understand helping someone in need. How long are we talking about? A few weeks, maybe a month. Long enough to establish the security protocols and begin the legal processes to protect the foundation assets. Long enough for me to recover and start implementing the changes that will make the inheritance meaningful rather than just wealthy. Marcus checked his watch. Nearly midnight, and Emma would be wondering why he hadn't called to say goodnight. But she was safe at her friend's house, probably asleep, giving him time to make a decision that felt far too large for one person to handle. There's something else, Alexandra said quietly. Something I haven't told you yet. Marcus braced himself for another revelation. What? The cardiac episode tonight wasn't entirely stress-related. I've been poisoned, Marcus. Small doses over time, probably in my food or medication. That's why I've been having these episodes, why my health has been deteriorating. Someone has been trying to kill me slowly, make it look like natural causes. The hospital room felt suddenly cold despite the warm air circulation. Do you have proof? Blood tests from my private physician. Traces of digitalis, a heart medication that's therapeutic in proper doses but fatal in higher concentrations. Someone with medical knowledge has been dosing me carefully, probably hoping to trigger exactly what happened tonight, but without anyone around to help. Marcus felt the full weight of what he'd stumbled into settling around him like a trap. If you know this, why haven't you gone to the police? With what evidence? Digitalis is a legitimate medication I'm prescribed for my heart condition. The poisoning would be almost impossible to prove in court, and my cousins have enough legal power to make any investigation disappear. Plus, I don't know who I can trust within my own organization. Whoever is doing this has access to my private spaces, my food, my medication. It's someone close. All the more reason to involve law enforcement, and all the more reason to make sure the foundation assets are legally protected before something happens to me. If I die without a clear succession plan, everything goes to Daniel and Rebecca by default. All the charitable work, all the community rebuilding, all the environmental restoration dies with me. Marcus stood again, moving to the window as he tried to process everything. Below, the city continued its quiet existence, unaware that decisions being made in this hospital room might affect thousands of lives. Emma was asleep somewhere out there, trusting that her father would make choices that kept her safe and happy. How could he possibly explain that helping a stranger might put them both in danger, but that not helping might mean allowing terrible injustices to continue? I need to call Emma, he said finally. Check on her, make sure she's okay. Of course, but Marcus, please be careful what you say over the phone. If my suspicions are correct, my communications are being monitored. Yours might be too, now that you're involved. Marcus pulled out his phone, moving toward the bathroom for privacy. Emma's friend answered on the third ring, her mother's voice warm and reassuring in the background. Dad? Is everything okay? You sound weird. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Work ran really late, but I wanted to say goodnight. Mrs. Patterson made us hot chocolate and we watched movies. Can I stay for breakfast? Her mom said it's okay if you say yes. Marcus felt a surge of relief. Emma was safe, happy, and settled for the night. That sounds great. I'll pick you up tomorrow afternoon, okay? Maybe we can do something special. Like what? I'll surprise you. Get some sleep, Em. Love you. Love you too, Dad. As Marcus ended the call, he realized he'd just bought himself 12 hours to figure out how to protect his daughter while honoring his promise to Alexandra. 12 hours to decide whether to walk away from the biggest moral challenge of his life, or step into a world of wealth and danger that could destroy everything he'd built since Lisa's death. When he returned to Alexandra's bedside, she was studying his face intently. She's safe, for now. But Alexandra, if I do this, if I agree to help you, I need guarantees about Emma's safety. Professional security, but invisible. She can't know she's being protected, and she can't be afraid. Already arranged. The team includes specialists in family protection. Emma will never know they're there unless there's an actual threat. Marcus pulled the will from his pocket, unfolding it once more. The legal language was complex, but the intent was clear. Alexandra Whitmore was offering him the power to change the world, along with all the dangers that came with such responsibility. If I say yes, there's no going back, is there? Probably not. Once my cousins discover what I've done, once they realize you're standing between them and billions of dollars, you'll always be a target. But Marcus, think about what we could accomplish together. The lives we could save, the communities we could rebuild, the research we could fund. Your wife's death could mean something larger, something that prevents other families from suffering the way you did. Marcus thought about Lisa, about the conversations they'd had during her final weeks, when she'd made him promise to give Emma every opportunity, to never let bitterness or fear prevent them from helping others. She would have understood the choice he was facing, would have pushed him toward the harder path if it meant making a difference. Okay, he said quietly. I'm in. But we do this carefully, safely, and Emma comes first, always. Alexandra's smile was radiant, despite her exhaustion. Thank you, Marcus. You have no idea what this means to me. I think I'm starting to understand. Marcus folded the will again, this time placing it carefully in his wallet. Now tell me everything. Every detail about your cousins, the company structure, the poisoning, all of it. If I'm going to protect Emma, and help you fix this mess, I need to know exactly what we're up against. As Alexandra began explaining the complex web of corporate politics and family betrayal that had led to this moment, Marcus felt the last pieces of his simple life falling away. By tomorrow, he would be part of a world he'd never wanted to enter, responsible for decisions that could affect thousands of lives, and targeted by people who saw murder as an acceptable business strategy. But he would also be in a position to honor Lisa's memory in ways he'd never imagined possible, to give Emma a future free from the financial fears that had haunted their family, and to ensure that wealth was used to heal rather than harm. It was terrifying, and overwhelming, and completely necessary. Outside the hospital window, dawn was beginning to break over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility. Marcus Chen, former pharmacist and current prescription delivery driver, was about to become one of the most powerful men in the world. Whether he survived the transition remained to be seen. The black SUV that picked up Marcus from the hospital parking lot was unlike anything he'd ever ridden in. Leather seats that adjusted to his body temperature, soundproof windows, and two men in the front seats, who introduced themselves simply as Davis and Rodriguez from Alexandra's security team. They spoke in measured professional tones that suggested military backgrounds and serious training. Miss Whitmore briefed us on the situation, Davis explained as they pulled onto the interstate. We'll be conducting a security assessment of your daughter's location this morning. Purely observational. She won't know we're there. Marcus gripped his phone tighter, fighting the urge to call Emma immediately. What exactly are you looking for? Exit routes, potential vulnerabilities, anyone who might be conducting surveillance. Standard protocol when a principal's associates might become targets. Rodriguez glanced at Marcus in the rearview mirror. Your daughter's safety is our priority, Mr. Chen. We don't take chances. The drive to Mercer Island took them through downtown Seattle, past the towering offices of Whitmore Industries. Marcus stared up at the glass and steel monument to wealth that Alexandra was preparing to dismantle, imagining the thousands of employees who had no idea their company was about to become the world's largest charitable foundation. The responsibility felt crushing. Alexandra's mansion looked different in daylight, less imposing but more isolated. Surrounded by manicured grounds and tall hedges that provided privacy, it was a fortress disguised as a home. As they pulled through electronic gates that closed immediately behind them, Marcus counted at least 6 security cameras and suspected there were many more hidden throughout the property. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a woman in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes. Mr. Chen, I'm Helen Morrison, Miss Whitmore's assistant and house manager. She's asked me to show you around and help you get settled. The interior of the mansion felt different without the emergency atmosphere of the previous night. In daylight, Marcus could appreciate the careful balance between wealth and warmth that Alexandra had achieved. Expensive art coexisted with comfortable furniture, and fresh flowers softened the sharp edges of contemporary design. This was a home, not just a showplace. Miss Whitmore should be released from the hospital this afternoon, Helen explained as she led him through rooms that seemed to go on forever. She's asked me to prepare the guest wing for you and your daughter. 3 bedrooms, private sitting area, and a kitchen if you prefer to prepare your own meals. Marcus paused in front of a wall of photographs that he'd missed during the previous night's chaos. Unlike the formal portraits he'd expected, these showed Alexandra in candid moments. Teaching children at what appeared to be a community center, working alongside construction crews at a housing project, covered in mud at what might have been an environmental cleanup. In every image, she looked genuinely happy in a way that seemed impossible given her current circumstances. She doesn't talk much about that work, Helen said, noticing his interest. But it's what matters most to her. The company, the money, all of it is just a means to an end. She wants to fix things. What kinds of things? Helen's expression grew more serious. Everything her family broke.
Communities destroyed by development projects, ecosystems damaged by shipping routes, people displaced by corporate expansion. She's been working on it for years, but quietly. The foundation announcement was her way of going public with plans she's been developing since her father died. A phone buzzed, and Helen answered with practiced efficiency. After a brief conversation, she turned to Marcus with concern evident in her voice. That was hospital security. 2 people claiming to be Miss Whitmore's cousins attempted to visit her this morning. They became quite aggressive when denied access and had to be escorted from the premises. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Daniel and Rebecca, I assume so. Miss Whitmore warned us this might happen. Helen moved toward a window that overlooked the front grounds, her gaze careful and alert. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you something important. Are you prepared for what this means? Not just the money, but the danger. These people have resources, connections, and very few moral boundaries. I'm beginning to understand that. I've worked for this family for 15 years. I watched Alexandra's father become consumed by greed and power, saw how it destroyed his relationships with everyone who mattered. But Alexandra is different. She has something her father never had. A conscience. That's why her cousins want her gone. Guilt doesn't drive quarterly profits. A chime sounded through the house, and Helen checked her phone again. The security team needs to brief you on the protocols. They're in the office where you found Miss Whitmore last night. The office had been cleaned and organized, but Marcus could still remember exactly where Alexandra had been lying on the Persian rug, clutching her chest and fighting for breath. Now it looked like any other executive workspace, except for the bank of monitors showing feeds from security cameras positioned throughout the property. Davis and Rodriguez were waiting with a third man who introduced himself as Thompson, head of Alexandra's personal security. He was older than the others, with gray at his temples and scars that suggested a military background involving actual combat. Mr. Chen, we need to discuss immediate protective measures. Thompson began without preamble. Our surveillance indicates that Daniel and Rebecca Whitmore have hired a private investigation firm to conduct background checks on anyone who's had recent contact with Miss Whitmore. That includes you. Marcus sank into a chair, the reality of his situation settling deeper into his consciousness. What will they find? Everything. Your employment history, financial records, your wife's medical records, your daughter's school information, your daily routines. These people are thorough, and they have unlimited resources. Thompson consulted a tablet. We've already moved to protect your daughter. Discreet surveillance at her friend's house, background checks on the family she's staying with, monitoring of local communications. She's safe, but that won't last long if her location becomes known. How long before they connect me to Alexandra? They probably already have. The ambulance call, hospital records, your presence here this morning. By tonight, they'll know your name, address, and life story. Thompson's expression was grim. Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something. These people aren't just greedy, they're desperate. $12 billion can make people do things they never imagined possible.
Rodriguez spoke up from his position by the monitors. We've identified at least 3 vehicles conducting surveillance on your apartment building since dawn. Professional teams, well-equipped, patient. They're waiting for you to come home. Marcus thought about his modest apartment, the neighbors who'd watched Emma grow up, the simple life he'd built after Lisa's death. All of it was now contaminated by his association with Alexandra, transformed from sanctuary to trap in the space of a single night. What do you recommend? Complete relocation for both you and your daughter. New identities if necessary, though we'd prefer to avoid that if possible. Miss Whitmore has properties in several states where you could stay safely while we develop long-term security protocols. Emma has school friends, a whole life here. I can't just make her disappear. Thompson nodded with understanding. We're not suggesting permanent relocation. But until we neutralize the immediate threat, distance is your best protection. Miss Whitmore has a ranch in Montana, completely secure, private tutors available if needed. Your daughter could think of it as an extended vacation. Marcus's phone rang, interrupting the conversation. Emma's number appeared on the screen, and he answered immediately, aware that everyone in the room was listening. Dad, something weird is happening. Mrs. Patterson says there are people in a car outside asking questions about you. She seems scared. Marcus felt his blood pressure spike. Listen to me carefully. I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't go outside, and don't talk to anyone you don't know. I'm coming to get you right now. Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on? I'll explain everything when I see you, sweetheart. Just stay put, okay? I'll be there in 20 minutes. Thompson was already moving toward the door. We leave now. Davis and Rodriguez will follow in a second vehicle. Mr. Chen, I need you to call your daughter back and have her pack everything she'll need for a week-long trip. Tell her whatever you think she'll believe, but make sure she's ready to leave immediately when we arrive. The drive across the lake felt like the longest 20 minutes of Marcus's life. Thompson drove with professional calm while maintaining radio contact with multiple security teams positioned throughout the city. The casual conversations about potential hostiles and extraction protocols made Marcus feel like he'd fallen into a movie rather than real life. There, Thompson said, pointing to a dark sedan parked half a block from Emma's friend's house. Professional surveillance, probably armed, definitely reporting your movements to whoever hired them. Marcus could see Emma's face in an upstairs window, watching for his arrival. She looked scared and confused. Nothing like the confident 10-year-old who'd said goodbye to him the previous morning. The transformation felt like a physical blow to his chest. How do we do this without terrifying her? Quick and calm. You go to the door, get her and her things, bring her to the car. We handle everything else. Thompson's voice was steady and reassuring. Mr. Chen, your daughter's life changed the moment you decided to help Miss Whitmore. We can't undo that, but we can keep her safe while she adjusts to the new reality. Emma was waiting at the front door with her overnight bag clutched in both hands. Her friend's mother, Mrs. Patterson, looked pale and worried as she handed over Emma's school backpack and jacket. Mr. Chen, those men in the car have been asking neighbors about you and Emma. Personal questions, offering money for information. I didn't tell them anything, but I'm concerned about what they want. Thank you for protecting her. I'll explain everything when I can. Marcus wrapped his arm around Emma's shoulders, feeling how tense she was. Ready for an adventure, sweetheart? Emma looked up at him with eyes that were too old for her age. Dad, are we in trouble? No, we're helping someone who's in trouble, and that means we need to be extra careful for a while. Remember how Mom used to say that doing the right thing isn't always easy? Emma nodded, her grip on his hand tightening as they walked toward Thompson's vehicle. Is this about the lady you helped last night? Marcus was continually amazed by his daughter's perceptiveness. Yes, her name is Alexandra, and some bad people are trying to hurt her. We're going to make sure she stays safe. Are the bad people trying to hurt us too? Marcus considered lying, but Emma deserved honesty. They might be. That's why we're going to stay somewhere safe until everything gets figured out. Emma climbed into the back seat without complaint,
though Marcus could see her studying Thompson with the careful attention she usually reserved for new teachers or doctors. "Are you a policeman?" "Something like that. I keep people safe for a living." Thompson adjusted the rearview mirror so he could see Emma's face. "What's your favorite kind of music?" "Taylor Swift, and Disney songs." "Why?" "Just wondering what we should listen to on our drive. It might be a long one." As they pulled away from the curb, Marcus watched the surveillance car in Thompson's side mirror. It followed for several blocks before being intercepted by what appeared to be a police vehicle, though Marcus suspected it was actually another part of Alexandra's security team. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, her voice small in the spacious back seat. "To meet Alexandra first so you can see that she's okay. Then we're going to her house for a while." Marcus turned to look at his daughter, noting the worry lines that had appeared around her eyes. I know this is scary and confusing, but I need you to trust me, okay? Everything I'm doing is to keep you safe and to help someone who really needs our help. Like when Mom was sick and people brought us food and helped with rides." The comparison caught Marcus off guard, but it was perfect. Exactly like that. Sometimes people need help, and sometimes we're the ones who can provide it. Emma was quiet for several minutes, processing the situation with the careful deliberation she'd inherited from her mother. Finally, she spoke again. "Is Alexandra nice?" "I think you'll like her. She's very smart, and she cares about helping people kind of like Mom did." "Will we be able to come home soon?" Marcus met Thompson's eyes in the mirror, seeing the same uncertainty he felt reflected there. "I hope so, sweetheart. But right now, the most important thing is keeping you safe." The hospital looked different in daylight, less ominous but more institutional. Emma held Marcus's hand tightly as they made their way through corridors that smelled of disinfectant and floor wax. Her experience with hospitals was limited to the few times she'd visited Lisa during her final illness, and Marcus could feel her tension increasing with each step. "It's okay, Em. Alexandra is much better now, and we're just visiting to make sure she's all right." Alexandra's room had been upgraded to a secure wing with additional privacy measures. Two men in suits flanked the corridor, and Thompson spoke quietly with them before nodding to Marcus and Emma. "She's awake and expecting you. The doctor says she can be discharged this afternoon if her latest tests look good." Alexandra was sitting up in bed, looking far more alert and healthy than she had the previous night. She'd managed to have her hair styled and was wearing a silk robe that somehow made the hospital environment seem less clinical. When she saw Emma, her face lit up with genuine warmth. "You must be Emma. Your father told me so many wonderful things about you." Emma moved closer to the bed, her natural curiosity overcoming her nervousness. "Are you feeling better? Dad said you were really sick." "Much better, thanks to your dad. He saved my life." Alexandra's voice was gentle and sincere. "I understand you're going to stay at my house for a while. Have you ever seen a house with a movie theater and a swimming pool?" Emma's eyes widened. "A movie theater, like a real one? With a popcorn machine and everything. And there's a library with books from floor to ceiling, and a garden where we grow vegetables and flowers." Alexandra glanced at Marcus with a slight smile. "I was hoping you might help me plant some new flowers when spring really arrives. I've never planted flowers before." "Then I'll teach you. My grandmother taught me when I was about your age, and it's one of my favorite things to do." Marcus watched the interaction with a mixture of relief and growing affection for Alexandra. She was speaking to Emma as an equal, not talking down to her, or overwhelming her with false cheerfulness. Emma was responding with the same openness she'd shown to Lisa's friends who had helped them after the funeral. "Mr. Chen." Dr. Patterson appeared in the doorway with a clipboard and a tired expression. "Miss Whitmore's latest tests look good. We're prepared to discharge her whenever she's ready. Any restrictions on activity?" "Nothing strenuous for a few days, regular monitoring of her heart rate, and she needs to avoid stress." The doctor paused, glancing around the room at the security personnel and the serious faces. "Though I suspect avoiding stress might be challenging given her circumstances." Alexandra stood carefully, testing her balance and energy levels. "I feel fine, doctor. ready to go home and start recovering properly. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Marcus felt the weight of irrevocable change settling around them. Emma was chattering excitedly about the movie theater and swimming pool, already beginning to adjust to their new reality with the resilience of childhood. But Marcus knew that once they arrived at Alexandra's mansion, there would be no returning to their simple life. Thompson coordinated their exit with military precision, using service elevators and back entrances to avoid the main lobby where reporters had begun to gather. News of Alexandra's hospitalization had apparently leaked, bringing unwanted media attention to what should have been a private medical matter. Miss Whitmore, Thompson said as they reached the parking garage, "We've identified at least 3 news crews at the main entrance, plus additional surveillance teams that aren't media. Your cousins are escalating their efforts to monitor your activities." Alexandra's jaw tightened. "Let them watch. By the time they figure out what we're really doing, it'll be too late to stop it." The ride back to Mercer Island felt like a journey into an alternate universe. Emma pressed her face against the car window, marveling at the size of the houses and the luxury of their surroundings. Marcus found himself seeing the wealth through his daughter's eyes, remembering his own childhood fascination with places and people that seemed to exist in a different world entirely. "Dad," Emma said quietly, "are we rich now?" The question was more perceptive than Marcus had expected. "Why do you ask?" "Because this car is nicer than anything we've ever been in. And Alexandra's house is like something from a movie, and there are all these people taking care of us." Emma turned to look at him with serious eyes. "Are we different now?" Marcus considered how to answer. "Emma's, we're still the same people we've always been. But Alexandra has asked us to help her with something very important, and that means our lives are going to be different for a while." "Different how?" "Different like we might have to be more careful about where we go and who we talk to. Different like we'll be living in a much bigger house with people around to keep us safe. Different like you might go to a different school for a while." Emma processed this information with the seriousness she brought to all major changes. "Will we still be a family?" The question nearly broke Marcus's heart. "Always, sweetheart. No matter what happens, no matter where we live or what we have, we'll always be a family. That's the one thing that will never change." As they passed through the electronic gates of Alexandra's estate, Marcus saw Emma's eyes grow wide at the scope of the property. Gardens, outbuildings, and a main house that seemed to stretch in all directions. It was the kind of place she'd only seen in movies, and now it was going to be home. "Mr. Chen," Alexandra said as the car stopped in front of the main entrance. "I know this is overwhelming for both of you, but I want you to know that having you here, having Emma here, makes me feel safer than I have in months. You're not just helping me survive, you're helping me remember why survival is worth fighting for." Emma looked between them with the intuitive understanding that children sometimes possess. "Dad, I think Alexandra needs us." Marcus met Alexandra's eyes, seeing gratitude and hope and determination in equal measure. "I think you're right, Em. And I think we need her too." As they walked toward the mansion's front door, Marcus realized that his old life was officially over. Whatever came next would be built on the foundation of this moment, this choice to help a stranger who had become something more important than he'd ever expected. The future was uncertain and potentially dangerous, but for the first time since Lisa's death, Marcus felt like he was part of something larger than his own survival. Emma skipped ahead toward the entrance, her excitement overcoming her nervousness, and Marcus knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. All 3 of them, bound by circumstance and choice into something that might become a family worth fighting to protect. Emma's laughter echoed through the mansion's indoor swimming pool area, as she discovered the underwater lighting system that turned the water different colors. For the past 3 days, she had been exploring Alexandra's home like a kid in the world's most elaborate playground, and her joy was infectious. Marcus watched from a poolside chair as Alexandra taught Emma how to adjust the lights using a tablet, both of them giggling as the pool shifted from blue to purple to green.
"She's remarkable," Alexandra said, settling into the chair beside Marcus. Her color had returned completely, and she moved with the confidence of someone whose health was no longer in question. Emma has this way of making everything feel normal, even when nothing about our situation is normal. Marcus nodded, though his attention was partly focused on the discreet security cameras positioned around the pool area. In 3 days, he'd learned to spot them everywhere, constant reminders that their safety depended on constant vigilance. She's always been good at adapting. Had to be, after her mother died. She talks about Lisa a lot. It's clear she loved her deeply. Lisa was everything to Emma. Patient, creative, endlessly supportive. I worry sometimes that I'm not enough, that I can't give her everything a mother would have provided. Alexandra turned to study his profile. Marcus, in 3 days I've watched you anticipate Emma's needs before she even knows she has them. You've helped her navigate this completely foreign situation with grace and humor. You're exactly the father she needs. Their conversation was interrupted by Thompson's arrival. His expression more serious than usual. He waited until Emma was completely absorbed in her light show before speaking. We have a problem. Daniel and Rebecca Whitmore have petitioned the court for an emergency hearing regarding Alexandra's mental competency. They're claiming that her recent hospitalization, combined with what they call erratic financial decisions, proves she's unfit to control the company assets. Alexandra's face went pale. When is the hearing? Tomorrow morning. They've assembled a team of psychiatrists willing to testify that anyone who would give away $12 billion must be mentally unstable. They're also planning to introduce evidence about your association with Mr. Chen, suggesting that you're being manipulated by someone seeking financial gain. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest. They're going to drag Emma into this. Almost certainly. They'll paint you as a gold digger who's using his daughter to gain sympathy and access. It's a narrative that could be very compelling to a judge who doesn't know the real situation. Alexandra stood up, pacing to the edge of the pool where Emma was now floating on her back, staring up at the glass ceiling. What are our legal options? Limited. They've chosen their judge carefully. Someone with a history of favoring family challenges to estate planning. If they can convince him that you're mentally incompetent, they can have you committed for observation while they take control of the company. Committed. Marcus's voice was sharp with alarm. 72-hour psychiatric hold, supposedly for your own protection. But once they have control of Whitmore Industries, they can make that hold indefinite by claiming you're a danger to yourself or others. Thompson's expression was grim. Mr. Chen, if that happens, you and Emma become immediate targets. Without Alexandra's protection, you'd be completely vulnerable. Emma had stopped floating and was now sitting on the pool edge, her legs dangling in the water. Something in their tone had caught her attention, and Marcus could see her listening even as she pretended to be absorbed in the colored lights. What do you recommend? Alexandra asked. Accelerate everything. Complete the foundation transfer tonight. Establish the legal frameworks that would make it impossible for Daniel and Rebecca to reverse your decisions even if they gain temporary control. It means working through the night with a team of lawyers, but it's our only chance to protect the assets and ensure your wishes are honored. Alexandra looked at Marcus, her eyes reflecting the weight of decision. That also means finalizing your role as primary beneficiary. Once the papers are signed and filed, there's no going back. You'll be legally responsible for $12 billion in charitable assets, whether I'm declared competent or not. Marcus thought about his modest apartment, his delivery truck, his simple life that had been turned upside down by one act of kindness. The responsibility felt overwhelming, but the alternative was allowing Alexandra's cousins to destroy years of careful planning and condemn thousands of people to continued suffering. Dad. Emma's voice was small and careful. Is something bad happening? Marcus moved to sit beside her at the pool's edge, his feet joining hers in the warm water. Remember how I told you that helping people sometimes means making hard choices? Emma nodded, her expression serious beyond her years. Well, Alexandra needs our help to make sure her money goes to people who really need it, instead of people who just want to be richer. But that means we have to do some complicated grown-up stuff that might be scary for a while. Are the bad people going to try to hurt Alexandra again? Marcus was continually amazed by his daughter's ability to cut through complexity and reach the heart of any situation.
They're going to try. But we're not going to let them succeed. Emma looked at Alexandra, who had moved closer and was now sitting on Emma's other side. Are you scared? A little, Alexandra admitted. But I'm also determined. And having you and your dad here makes me feel braver than I've felt in a long time. Mom used to say that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. Marcus felt his throat tighten at hearing Lisa's words in Emma's voice. Your mom was very wise. She also said that families take care of each other. And sometimes families aren't just people who are related by blood. Emma looked between Marcus and Alexandra with the intensity she usually reserved for important decisions. Are we a family now? The question hung in the air above the pool, more profound than any legal document or financial arrangement. Marcus saw tears forming in Alexandra's eyes, and he felt his own chest tighten with emotion he hadn't expected. I'd like that very much, Alexandra said softly. If you and your dad would have me. Emma grinned and launched herself into Alexandra's arms, nearly sending both of them into the pool. Then we'll take care of each other. No matter what happens. That evening, Alexandra's mansion transformed into a war room. Lawyers arrived in waves, setting up computers and document stations throughout the first floor. Marcus found himself signing papers he barely understood, trusting Alexandra's legal team to explain the implications of each decision. The foundation structure was complex, designed to be bulletproof against legal challenges, and impossible to reverse once implemented. Mr. Chen, the lead attorney explained. You're not just becoming a beneficiary. You're becoming the foundation's primary decision maker, with full authority to distribute assets according to the charitable guidelines Miss Whitmore has established. It's an enormous responsibility. Marcus looked around the room at the assembled legal expertise, all focused on transferring more wealth than most countries possessed. What if I make mistakes? What if I'm not qualified to make these kinds of decisions? You'll have advisors, oversight committees, and detailed guidelines. But ultimately, the choices will be yours. Miss Whitmore has structured it this way, because she trusts your judgment more than she trusts any institutional framework. Emma had fallen asleep on a couch in Alexandra's study, surrounded by legal documents, and the quiet intensity of people working against a deadline. Marcus covered her with a blanket, marveling at her ability to find peace in the middle of chaos. She's going to wake up in a different world, Alexandra said, joining him beside the couch. We all are. Marcus turned to face her, struck by how much had changed since that night in the storm. Alexandra, are you sure about this? Once these papers are filed, you're trusting me with everything your family built over 3 generations. I'm trusting you with the chance to fix everything my family broke over 3 generations. There's a difference. Alexandra's voice was steady and certain. Marcus, I've spent 5 years learning about corporate responsibility and charitable giving. I've studied every successful foundation, analyzed every failure, consulted with experts around the world. The one thing they all agree on is that money without conscience is destructive, but money guided by someone who understands suffering can heal the world. And you think I understand suffering? I think you understand what it means to lose someone you love, to worry about your child's future, to make sacrifices for people who matter to you. I think you understand that wealth is meaningless unless it serves something larger than itself. Alexandra gestured toward the sleeping Emma. Look at her, Marcus. She's 10 years old, and she already knows that families take care of each other. Imagine what she could accomplish with the resources to match her compassion. The lawyers worked through the night, finalizing documents that would restructure one of America's largest fortunes. By dawn, the Whitmore Foundation would be legally established with Marcus Chen as its primary administrator, Emma Chen as the secondary beneficiary, and a detailed framework for charitable distribution that prioritized healthcare, education, environmental restoration and community development. At 3 in the morning, Thompson appeared with news that made everyone's exhaustion seem irrelevant. The hearing has been moved up. Daniel and Rebecca convinced the judge that Alexandra represents an immediate danger to herself and the company's stakeholders. You're due in court in 6 hours. Alexandra looked around the room at the controlled chaos of legal preparation. Are we ready? Legally? Yes. The foundation documents will be filed electronically at 8 a.m., 2 hours before the hearing begins. But Alexandra, you need to understand that even if we succeed legally, your cousins won't give up. They have too much to lose. What are you saying? I'm saying that after today, the gloves come off. If they can't get the money through legal means, they'll try other approaches. More dangerous approaches. Marcus thought about Emma, still sleeping peacefully despite the activity around her. What kind of approaches? Thompson's expression was grim. The kind that explain why we've been planning your relocation to Montana. After the hearing, win or lose, you'll need to disappear until we can neutralize the threat permanently. The courtroom was packed with reporters, lawyers and observers who had been drawn by the spectacle of a $12 billion competency hearing. Marcus sat in the front row with Emma, who had insisted on coming despite his protests. She wore her best dress and had braided her hair with the careful attention to detail that reminded him painfully of Lisa. Daniel and Rebecca Whitmore looked exactly like what they were: wealthy, entitled and accustomed to getting their way. Daniel was tall and silver-haired, with the kind of commanding presence that suggested boardroom experience. Rebecca was elegantly dressed and perfectly composed, but Marcus could see the calculated coldness in her eyes when she looked at Alexandra. They look mean, Emma whispered, and Marcus realized she'd been studying them too. Remember what we talked about? Sometimes people do bad things when they want something badly enough, but that doesn't mean they get to win. The judge was exactly what Thompson had warned them about: older, conservative, and clearly skeptical of Alexandra's recent decisions. As the hearing began, Daniel and Rebecca's legal team painted a picture of a mentally unstable woman who had been manipulated into making irrational financial decisions by a stranger with obvious ulterior motives. Your Honor, Daniel's attorney began, the evidence will show that Alexandra Whitmore has suffered a complete break from reality, evidenced by her plan to give away the family fortune to a man she met during a medical emergency. This is clearly the behavior of someone who is no longer capable of making rational decisions about her own welfare or the welfare of the thousands of employees who depend on Whitmore Industries. Alexandra's legal team countered with documentation of her mental health, her consistent charitable interests, and the carefully planned nature of the foundation structure. But Marcus could see that the judge was already leaning toward the cousin's narrative. Chen, the judge said suddenly, addressing Marcus directly, would you please explain to the court your relationship with Miss Whitmore and your understanding of why she has chosen to make you the beneficiary of her estate? Marcus stood, acutely aware that every word could determine not just his future but Emma's and Alexandra's as well. Your Honor, 3 days ago I was delivering prescription medication to Miss Whitmore's home. I found her unconscious and in cardiac distress. I provided emergency medical care and stayed with her until paramedics arrived. Since then, she has asked for my help in establishing a charitable foundation that would use her wealth to help people who are struggling the way my family struggled when my wife was dying of cancer. And you expect this court to believe that you have no financial interest in this arrangement? Marcus thought about the signed documents, the legal responsibilities he'd accepted, the enormous trust Alexandra had placed in him. Your Honor, I expect this court to consider whether someone who has spent the last 2 years working as a prescription delivery driver to support his daughter is likely to be capable of manipulating a successful businesswoman into giving him $12 billion. I expect this court to ask why. If I were a gold digger, I would agree to put that money into a charitable foundation instead of keeping it for myself. The judge frowned, and Marcus could see he'd scored a point. Rebecca Whitmore's attorney quickly stood to redirect attention. Your Honor, the defendant's manipulation doesn't have to be sophisticated to be effective. Sometimes the most successful con artists are those who appear harmless and sympathetic. Objection, Alexandra's attorney said. Mr. Chen is not on trial here, and there's no evidence of any manipulation or fraud. The hearing continued for 2 more hours, with expert witnesses and character testimony from both sides. But Marcus could feel the momentum shifting when Emma was called to testify. Emma, the judge said gently, can you tell me about your relationship with Miss Whitmore? Emma looked tiny in the witness chair, but her voice was clear and confident. "She's my friend. She taught me how to change the colors in her swimming pool, and she's going to teach me how to plant flowers. She listens when I talk about my mom, and she doesn't get sad the way some grown-ups do." "Emma, do you understand that your father might receive a lot of money from Miss Whitmore? I understand that Alexandra wants to use her money to help people, and she asked my dad to help her because he's really good at helping people. When my mom was sick, my dad helped her every day, even when he was scared and sad. And when I was scared after she died, he helped me too." Emma paused, looking directly at Daniel and Rebecca. "I think Alexandra knows that my dad helps people because he cares about them, not because he wants their money." The simplicity and honesty of Emma's testimony seemed to shift something in the courtroom atmosphere. Even the judge appeared moved by her straightforward assessment of the situation. Rebecca's attorney made one final attempt to discredit the arrangement. "Your Honor, we ask the court to consider that a 10-year-old child cannot possibly understand the implications of a $12 billion inheritance, nor can her father be trusted to make decisions of this magnitude without proper institutional oversight." Alexandra's attorney stood for rebuttal. "Your Honor, the foundation documents include extensive oversight mechanisms, advisory boards, and accountability measures. Mr. Chen won't be making decisions in isolation. Furthermore, the petitioner's argument seems to be that someone who understands poverty and loss is less qualified to distribute charitable funds than someone who has never experienced either. We respectfully suggest that the opposite is true." The judge retired for deliberation, leaving everyone to wait in tense silence. Marcus held Emma's hand, watching Alexandra's face for signs of her emotional state. She looked calm but determined, ready for whatever decision came. When the judge returned, his expression was neutral and unreadable. "After careful consideration of the evidence and testimony, this court finds that Alexandra Whitmore, while perhaps unconventional in her approach to wealth management, shows no signs of mental incompetence or impairment. Her decisions, while surprising to some, appear to be carefully considered and legally sound. The petition for conservatorship is denied." The courtroom erupted in noise and movement, but Marcus focused on Alexandra's face as relief and triumph transformed her expression. They had won, but he could see in Thompson's expression that victory in court might be only the beginning of their real challenges. As they left the courthouse through a side entrance to avoid the media crowd, Thompson's radio crackled with urgent communications from the security team. "We have a problem," he announced grimly. "3 vehicles, professional surveillance teams now following us. They're not just watching anymore. They're positioning for intercept." Alexandra's face went pale. "How long until we reach the house?" "Too long. They're going to make their move before we get to secure territory." Marcus pulled Emma closer, feeling the weight of decisions made and consequences that couldn't be undone. They had won the legal battle, but the war for Alexandra's life and Emma's safety was just beginning. The foundation was established. The money was protected, but the people who had tried to steal it were now desperate and dangerous. "Dad," Emma whispered, "are we going to be okay?" Marcus looked at his daughter, at Alexandra, at the uncertain future that stretched ahead of them. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be okay. We're a family now, and families take care of each other." Outside the car windows, Seattle flashed by in a blur of buildings and traffic, but Marcus's attention was focused entirely on the 2 people who had become the center of his world. Whatever came next, they would face it together, bound by choice and circumstance into something stronger than any legal document or financial arrangement. The foundation was established. The inheritance was secure, but the real test of their commitment to each other was just beginning. In the distance, sirens wailed, and Thompson's radio continued to crackle with updates from security teams, positioning themselves for a confrontation that would determine whether their victory in court would lead to safety or something far more dangerous. The first gunshot shattered the rear window of their vehicle as they rounded a corner 3 miles from the courthouse. Emma screamed and ducked instinctively while Marcus threw himself over her, his body becoming a shield between his daughter and whatever was happening outside. Alexandra pressed herself against the floor as Thompson accelerated hard. his training taking over as their sedan transformed from luxury transport to escape vehicle. "Stay down everyone," Thompson commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We've got 3 vehicles in pursuit. Professional operators. Definitely armed. This isn't surveillance anymore." Marcus could hear the engine straining as Thompson pushed their car beyond its design limits, tires squealing around turns as they raced through Seattle's streets. Emma was crying quietly against his chest, and he could feel her small body trembling with fear. "It's going to be okay, Em," he whispered, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. "Thompson knows what he's doing." Another shot rang out, this one striking the armored passenger door with a metallic thud that reminded Marcus that Alexandra had prepared for this possibility. The car was bulletproof, the windows were reinforced, and Thompson was clearly trained for exactly this kind of situation. "How far to back up?" Alexandra asked, her voice remarkably calm given the circumstances. 2 minutes if we can maintain this pace. Davis and Rodriguez are moving to intercept. And we've got local law enforcement responding to the gunshots." Thompson took another sharp turn, throwing everyone against the side of the car. "But they're persistent and well coordinated. This was planned." Through the chaos, Marcus found himself thinking about the morning's court victory. How relieved they'd all felt leaving the courthouse. The legal battle was over, but Daniel and Rebecca had clearly moved to a more direct approach. If they couldn't steal the fortune through manipulation of the legal system, they were apparently willing to commit murder to claim their inheritance. "Thompson," Alexandra said suddenly, "the emergency protocol we discussed. Now might be the time." "Agreed. Mr. Chen, in about 30 seconds we're going to stop abruptly. When I give the word, you'll have 5 seconds to get Emma and yourself into a second vehicle. Don't think. Don't hesitate. Just move." Marcus felt his heart racing as he processed the instructions. "What about Alexandra?" "I'll be right behind you. But Emma's safety comes first. Always." Ahead of them, Marcus could see 2 black SUVs positioning themselves to block traffic and create an opening in the pursuit. The precision of the maneuver suggested military-level coordination, and he realized that Alexandra's security team was far more sophisticated than he'd understood. "Now," Thompson said, and the car stopped so suddenly that Marcus felt like he'd been hit by a truck. The passenger door was already opening as Davis appeared beside the vehicle, automatic weapon visible but pointed down. "Move, move," he commanded, and Marcus found himself lifting Emma and running toward the second SUV without conscious thought. Emma was still crying, but she wrapped her arms around his neck and held on as they made the transfer. Alexandra appeared beside them seconds later, her face pale but determined. As soon as they were inside the second vehicle, it accelerated away from the scene, leaving Thompson and the pursuing vehicles behind. "Dad, what's happening?"
Emma's voice was small and scared, nothing like the confident girl who had testified in court just hours before. "Bad people are trying to hurt Alexandra, sweetheart. But we're safe now, and we're going somewhere they can't follow us." Rodriguez, who was driving their new vehicle, spoke without turning around. "We're heading to the airport. There's a private jet waiting that will take you to the Montana property. You'll be completely safe there while we handle the situation here in Seattle." Alexandra reached over and took Emma's hand gently.
"Emma, I'm so sorry this happened."
"I never wanted you or your dad to be in danger because of me." Emma looked up at her with eyes that seemed far too old for a 10-year-old. "It's not your fault. Bad people make their own choices." She paused, wiping tears from her cheeks.
"Are we still a family?"
The question broke Marcus's heart and filled it simultaneously. Even in the midst of terror and confusion, Emma was focused on what mattered most to her. "Always, Em. No matter what happens, we're still a family." The private airport was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. No crowds, no security lines, just efficient staff who guided them directly onto a sleek jet that looked more like a flying hotel room than an airplane. Emma's eyes widened as she took in the leather seats, the flat-screen televisions, and the kitchen area that was better equipped than their apartment had been. "I've never been on a plane before," she admitted as a flight attendant helped her with her seatbelt. "Then this will be an adventure," Alexandra said, settling into the seat across from her. "Wait until you see the view from up here."
As the plane taxied toward takeoff, Marcus watched Seattle disappear below them and wondered if they would ever be able to return. The foundation was established, the legal documents were filed, but their lives had been permanently altered by forces beyond their control. Alexandra, he said once Emma had fallen asleep, exhausted by the day's trauma. What happens now? We can't run forever. We don't have to. Thompson and his team are very good at what they do, and Daniel and Rebecca just made a critical mistake. Attempting murder in broad daylight, with multiple witnesses and surveillance cameras, gives law enforcement everything they need to build a case. My cousins let desperation override their judgment. And if they're arrested, then the threat ends, and we can start building the life we talked about. The foundation becomes operational. Emma gets her normal childhood back, and we figure out what it means to be a family that happens to control $12 billion in charitable assets. Marcus looked out the window at the clouds below, thinking about the impossibility of their situation. A week ago, he'd been a delivery driver worried about making rent. Now he was responsible for one of the world's largest fortunes, and the safety of two people who had become the most important parts of his life. Do you regret any of it? He asked. The foundation involving me and Emma, all of it? Alexandra followed his gaze out the window, her expression thoughtful. I regret that Emma had to be scared today. I regret that you've been forced into a situation you never asked for. But I don't regret trusting you with something that matters more to me than my own life. She turned to look at him directly.
Marcus, a week ago I was dying alone in my office.
Literally and figuratively. Now I have people who care whether I live or die, and a plan to use my family's wealth for something meaningful. No, I don't regret any of it. The Montana ranch appeared below them like something from a Western movie. Thousands of acres of rolling hills, forests and pastures, with a main house that managed to be both rustic and elegant. As they descended toward a private airstrip, Marcus could see horses in distant fields and a lake that reflected the afternoon sun like a mirror.
Emma
Woke up as they were landing, her fear from earlier replaced by curiosity about their destination. It's huge, she said, pressing her face against the window. Are there really horses? Lots of them, Alexandra confirmed.
and hiking trails and a swimming hole.
And probably more wildlife than you've ever seen. It's the perfect place to spend some time while the grown-ups sort everything out. The house was spectacular in its understatement. Log and stone construction that blended perfectly with the landscape, enormous windows that brought the outdoors inside, and furnishings that prioritized comfort over luxury.
Emma
Ran from room to room exploring with the enthusiasm of a child who had spent most of her life in a two-bedroom apartment. There's a game room with a pool table, she announced, returning to the main living area where Marcus and Alexandra were settling in. And a library with a ladder that goes all the way to the ceiling. And my bedroom has a window that looks right at the horses. Marcus felt some of the tension from the day's events beginning to ease. This place felt safe in a way that the Seattle mansion never had. Isolated and protected but not sterile or fortress-like. Emma was already beginning to relax, and he could see color returning to Alexandra's face. Chen, a woman's voice came from the kitchen area.
I'm Sarah Mitchell, the house manager here.
I've prepared dinner whenever you're ready, and I've stocked the pantry with everything on Emma's favorite foods list that Miss Whitmore provided. Marcus realized that even in the midst of legal battles and assassination attempts, Alexandra had been thinking about Emma's comfort and preferences. The attention to detail suggested a level of caring that went far beyond obligation or gratitude. That evening they sat on the ranch house's enormous porch, watching the sun set over the mountains while Emma played with a golden retriever that apparently came with the property. For the first time in days, Marcus felt like he could breathe normally. It's beautiful here, he said, accepting a cup of coffee from Alexandra. It was my grandmother's favorite place. She used to say that you could only see clearly when you got far enough away from the noise. Alexandra settled into the chair beside him, her own coffee steaming in the cool mountain air. I think she would have liked you, Marcus. She believed in people who did the right thing even when it cost them something. What did it cost her? Everything. Eventually, she spoke out against some of my grandfather's business practices, tried to use her influence to make the company more ethical. The family saw it as betrayal, and she spent her final years essentially exiled here. But she never stopped fighting for what she believed was right. Emma had convinced the dog to play fetch, and her laughter carried across the porch as she threw a tennis ball toward the pasture. The sound was pure joy, unmarked by the fear and confusion she'd experienced that morning. "She's resilient," Alexandra observed. "She's had to be. But this is the first time since Lisa died that I've seen her completely carefree. Even before today's drama, she's been carrying worries about money, about my job, about whether we'd be okay. Here she can just be a kid. That's what I want for both of you. The freedom to make choices based on what you believe is right, not what you can afford or what you're afraid of." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Thompson. Situation resolved. Both subjects in custody. Full details to follow. He showed the message to Alexandra, watching relief flood her expression. "It's over. The immediate danger is over. Daniel and Rebecca were arrested 2 hours ago, along with the team they hired to kill us. Apparently they were so confident in their plan that they didn't bother covering their tracks very well. Thompson has enough evidence to keep them in prison for a very long time." Marcus felt a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying lift from his shoulders. "So we can go home. We can go anywhere we want, stay here, go back to Seattle, travel the world while we set up foundation operations. For the first time in years, Marcus, we have complete freedom to choose our own path." Emma had tired of playing fetch, and was now lying on the porch steps with the dog, both of them watching the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Dad," she said without turning around, "can we stay here for a while? I like how quiet it is." Marcus looked at Alexandra, seeing his own feelings reflected in her expression. This place felt like a sanctuary, a chance to figure out what their new life would look like without the pressure of immediate danger or legal battles. "Would you like that, Alexandra? I think this is exactly where we need to be. Close enough to civilization to handle foundation business, far enough away to remember what really matters." She smiled, the expression transforming her face into something younger and less burdened. "Besides, I promised Emma I'd teach her to plant flowers. Spring comes early here, and the gardens are going to need attention." Over the following days, they fell into a routine that felt remarkably natural despite its complete departure from any of their previous lives. Emma explored the ranch with boundless energy, discovering streams and wildlife and hidden meadows that seemed designed for childhood adventures. Marcus found himself helping with ranch operations, his hands remembering skills he'd learned working summers on his uncle's farm as a teenager. Alexandra threw herself into foundation planning, using the ranch's high-tech communication systems to coordinate with lawyers, accountants and charitable organizations around the world. But it was the evenings that Marcus treasured most. They would gather on the porch or around the massive stone fireplace inside, sharing stories and making plans and gradually becoming the family that Emma had declared them to be. Alexandra proved to be a natural storyteller, regaling Emma with tales of her travels and adventures. Emma responded by sharing memories of Lisa, stories that no longer brought only sadness but also joy and connection. "Mom would have loved this place," Emma said one evening as they watched horses graze in the pasture beyond the house. "She always said she wanted to live somewhere she could see the stars." "She can see them," Alexandra said gently, "and I think she'd be proud of how brave you've been through all of this. Do you think she'd like you?" The question was asked with the directness that Marcus had come to associate with his daughter's most important inquiries. Alexandra considered it seriously before answering.
"I hope she would."
"I hope she'd see that I love you and your father, and that I'm trying to use the gifts I've been given to make the world a little better." Emma nodded with satisfaction. She would. Mom always said that the best people are the ones who help others even when nobody's watching. 2 weeks after their arrival in Montana, Marcus received a call that changed everything once again. Dr. Patterson from the hospital was calling with news about Alexandra's blood tests from the night of her cardiac episode. "Mr. Chen, I wanted to follow up on something unusual we discovered. The digitals levels in Miss Whitmore's blood weren't just elevated, they were accompanied by traces of a rare compound that's only found in certain types of exotic plants. Our toxicologist believes someone was using a very sophisticated poisoning method, probably something they learned from studying traditional medicines. Marcus felt cold despite the warm afternoon sun. Are you saying the poisoning was more complex than we realized? I'm saying that whoever was doing this had extensive knowledge of plant-based toxins and access to rare botanical specimens. It wasn't random, and it wasn't simple. Someone spent considerable time and effort developing a method that would be virtually undetectable in standard toxicology screens. After ending the call, Marcus found Alexandra in the ranch's garden, working alongside Emma to plant the flower beds they'd been planning. Both of them were covered in soil, laughing about some joke Emma had made about stubborn seeds. "Alexandra, we need to talk." Something in his tone made her look up immediately, concern replacing the joy in her expression. "What's wrong?" The poisoning was more sophisticated than anyone realized. Someone with extensive botanical knowledge, access to rare plants, time to develop an undetectable method. Alexandra sat back on her heels, processing the implications. Someone close enough to have long-term access to my food and medications, with the knowledge and resources to create a custom toxin. Someone we haven't identified yet. Emma had stopped digging, and was watching their conversation with the alertness that suggested she understood more than they might prefer. "Are the bad people coming back?" Marcus knelt beside her in the garden, taking her small hands in his soil-covered ones. "We don't know, Em, but we're going to find out, and we're going to make sure you stay safe no matter what. Can we stay here while you figure it out?" Marcus looked at Alexandra, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her face. The ranch felt like home in a way that surprised him, and Emma was thriving in the mountain environment. More importantly, it was secure, isolated, and staffed with people Alexandra trusted completely. "For as long as you want, sweetheart." That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus and Alexandra sat on the porch planning their investigation into the poisoning. The foundation work could continue from Montana, but they needed to identify the real threat before they could consider returning to their normal lives. "There's something I need to tell you," Alexandra said suddenly. "Something I've been putting off because I wasn't sure how to explain it." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "What?" "The will that names you as beneficiary. The foundation documents, all of it. There's a clause I didn't mention." Alexandra turned to face him directly. "If something happens to me, if the poisoning succeeds, or if there's another attempt on my life, you don't just inherit the charitable assets, you inherit everything. The ranch, the Seattle house, the art collection, all of it. Emma's future would be completely secure, no matter what happens." Marcus stared at her, processing the magnitude of what she was telling him. "Alexandra, that's not why I'm here. That's not why I agreed to help you." "I know, that's exactly why I structured it that way. Marcus, you've given me something I never thought I'd have: a real family. People who care about me for who I am rather than what I'm worth. If I don't survive whatever's coming next, I want to give Emma the security and opportunities that money can provide. But I want them managed by someone who will teach her that wealth is a responsibility, not just a privilege." The stars were brilliant in the Montana sky, unmarred by city lights or pollution. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a chance encounter in a snowstorm to this moment of complete trust and vulnerability. "We're going to figure out who's behind the poisoning," he said finally, "and we're going to stop them. All three of us are going to have long, happy lives together." Alexandra smiled, reaching over to take his hand. "Promise, promise." In the distance, Emma's voice carried through the open window of her bedroom, as she talked to the golden retriever who had become her constant companion. She was telling him about the flowers they'd planted, about her mother who lived in the stars, and about her new family that included a dad who helped people, and an Alexandra who was teaching her that money could be used to heal the world. Marcus listened to his daughter's voice, and felt something settle into place in his chest. They had found each other through crisis and danger, but they had chosen to stay together through love and commitment. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family, bound not by blood or legal documents, but by the choice to care for each other no matter what. The foundation was established, the immediate threats were neutralized, and Emma was safe and happy. But more than that, they had built something real and lasting from the wreckage of their individual losses. Alexandra had found people who loved her for herself. Marcus had found a way to honor Lisa's memory while building a new future. And Emma had gained the security and opportunities that would let her become whoever she chose to be. As the night deepened around the ranch house, Marcus realized that saving Alexandra's life that stormy night had ultimately saved his own. They were no longer three people struggling separately with loss and loneliness. They were a family, committed to each other and to using their unexpected resources to make the world a better place. It wasn't the ending any of them had expected, but it was the beginning of everything they'd never dared to hope for. The morning sun was filtering through the kitchen windows when Helen Morrison's call shattered the peaceful quiet of the Montana ranch. Marcus answered on the second ring, expecting routine foundation business, but the tremor in her voice immediately put him on high alert. "Mr. Chen, there's been a development in Seattle." The toxicology report revealed something disturbing. The rare plant compounds in Alexandra's blood tests match samples found in my personal greenhouse at the mansion. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Helen had been with the family for 15 years, had access to everything in Alexandra's daily routine, and possessed extensive knowledge of botany from maintaining the estate's elaborate gardens. "Helen, what are you saying?" "I'm saying someone used my greenhouse to cultivate the plants that nearly killed Alexandra. Someone who knew my routines, had access to the house, and understood enough about my gardening to replicate the conditions needed for these particular specimens." Her voice grew stronger with indignation. "Mr. Chen, I've been caring for this family since Alexandra was 17 years old. Someone is trying to frame me for attempted murder." Alexandra appeared in the kitchen doorway, Emma close behind her, both drawn by the serious tone of Marcus's conversation. He put the call on speaker so they could all hear Helen's explanation. "The police found a hidden section in my greenhouse containing plants that don't appear in any of my gardening logs. Aconitum ferox, Nerium oleander, and several others that are deadly in the right concentrations. They were grown with professional precision, harvested recently, and processed using equipment I've never seen before." "Who has access to your greenhouse besides you?" Alexandra asked, her face pale with the implications. "Estate maintenance staff, the landscaping crew, delivery personnel for gardening supplies, and of course anyone with administrative access to the house security systems." Helen paused. "Alexandra, I need to tell you something I should have mentioned years ago. Your father had the greenhouse specially constructed with a hidden room behind the main growing area. He said it was for valuable specimens, but I always wondered if there was another purpose." Marcus exchanged glances with Alexandra, both understanding that they were dealing with something far more complex than Daniel and Rebecca's crude attempt at intimidation. "Helen, do you have any idea who might know about this hidden room?" "Your father's old business associates, certain members of the board of directors, possibly some of the long-term household staff. But Marcus, there's something else. I found surveillance equipment in the hidden room, very sophisticated, recently installed. Someone has been watching my every move in that greenhouse for months." Emma moved closer to Alexandra, instinctively seeking comfort from the growing tension in the room. "Are we still safe here?" Alexandra wrapped her arm around Emma's shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart. This ranch is completely secure, and we're going to figure out who's behind this." "Helen," Marcus said, "what do the police think?" "They're treating me as their primary suspect, which is exactly what someone wanted. My fingerprints are all over the greenhouse. I have the botanical knowledge to create these toxins, and I've been present for every incident of Alexandra's declining health over the past year." Helen's voice grew bitter. "It's the perfect frame job, and I have no way to prove my innocence except to help you find the real culprit." After ending the call, they sat around the kitchen table while Emma fed treats to the golden retriever, trying to process the new information. The hidden room, the surveillance equipment and the elaborate frame job suggested someone with extensive resources and long-term access to the Whitmore family's inner circle. "We need a list," Alexandra said finally. "Everyone who knew about the greenhouse's hidden features, everyone with administrative access to house security, everyone who's been watching our movements for the past year." Marcus pulled out a notepad and began writing names as Alexandra recalled them. Board members, longtime business associates, household staff who had worked for her father, contractors who had done security upgrades. The list grew longer and more daunting with each addition. "There's another possibility we haven't considered," Alexandra said quietly. "What if this isn't about the inheritance at all? What if someone wants control of the foundation assets for their own purposes? Who would benefit from controlling $12 billion in charitable funds? Anyone who could manipulate the distribution process. Defense contractors who want funding for military applications disguised as humanitarian aid. Pharmaceutical companies seeking research grants for profitable projects. Real estate developers who could benefit from community development funds." Alexandra's expression grew grimmer. "The foundation structure gives the administrator enormous discretion over how money is distributed. Someone with the right connections could redirect billions of dollars while maintaining the appearance of legitimate charitable work." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling heavier on his shoulders. He'd been focused on protecting Emma and Alexandra from immediate physical danger, but hadn't fully considered the broader implications of controlling such massive resources. "Dad," Emma said suddenly, looking up from where she was playing with the dog, "what if the bad person is someone who's been pretending to help Alexandra but really wants to hurt her?" The simple observation hit Marcus like a lightning bolt.
They'd been assuming the threat came from outside the family's inner circle, but Emma was right. The most effective betrayal always came from those closest to the victim. "Emma, that's brilliant. Someone Alexandra trusts. Someone who's been part of her daily life. Someone with legitimate reasons to be in the house and around her food and medication." Alexandra was staring at Emma with something approaching awe. "Out of the mouths of babes. Emma, you've just identified the one possibility we've been too trusting to consider." They spent the rest of the morning reviewing Alexandra's inner circle with new suspicion. Dr. Richard Sterling, her personal physician who prescribed her heart medications. Margaret Walsh, her executive assistant, who managed her calendar and often handled her meals during business meetings. James Crawford, the head of household security who had access to every room and system in the mansion. "Any one of them could have been slowly poisoning you while appearing to help," Marcus said, studying the list they'd compiled. "The question is motivation. What would each of them gain from your death or incapacitation?" Alexandra moved to her laptop and began pulling up financial records and employment histories. "Dr. Sterling has gambling debts that would explain financial motivation. Margaret has a son with expensive medical needs that insurance won't cover. James has family members involved in private military contracting who could benefit from foundation funds directed toward defense-related humanitarian projects." The investigation continued through lunch and into the afternoon, with Emma contributing observations that repeatedly proved more insightful than the adults' complex theories. She had a gift for seeing through pretense and identifying inconsistencies in people's behavior. "Remember when we were at the hospital?" Emma said during one of their discussions, "and that doctor seemed surprised that Alexandra wanted to see Dad instead of her family. But if someone was trying to hurt her, wouldn't they want to visit her in the hospital to make sure their plan worked?" Marcus felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. Emma's right. Someone should have been more concerned about Alexandra's condition, more insistent about seeing her. The person trying to kill her would have wanted to assess whether their poisoning had been successful. Alexandra was scrolling through visitor logs and hospital records on her laptop. "Dr. Sterling called the hospital several times that night, asking about my condition and requesting to speak with the attending physician. He claimed it was professional concern, but he seemed unusually persistent about getting detailed information about my symptoms and treatment. That's not normal behavior for a doctor whose patient is being treated at a different facility. Not unless he was worried that his carefully planned poisoning had been interrupted by someone who provided more effective care than he'd anticipated." Marcus thought about that night, in Alexandra's office, how quickly he'd recognized her symptoms and provided the right medication. If Dr. Sterling had been slowly poisoning her while treating her supposed heart condition, Marcus's intervention would have been deeply threatening to his plans. "We need proof," Alexandra said. "Suspicions won't be enough to clear Helen or protect us from future attempts. How do we get proof without putting ourselves in danger?" Emma looked up from her drawing, where she'd been sketching the ranch and its surroundings.
What if we pretended to trust the bad person and let them think their plan is working? Marcus and Alexandra stared at his daughter, both recognizing the wisdom of her suggestion. If they could identify the real poisoner and create a situation where that person revealed their true intentions, they could gather the evidence needed to end the threat permanently. Emma, that's dangerous. We'd have to put Alexandra at risk to catch whoever's been trying to kill her. Not necessarily, Alexandra said slowly. What if I appeared to be getting sicker but in a controlled way, with real medical supervision? If Dr. Sterling is behind this, he'd want to monitor my condition. If it's Margaret, she'd want to be involved in managing my care. If it's James, he'd want to adjust security protocols based on my declining health. Marcus didn't like the idea of using Alexandra as bait, but he could see the logic. We'd need medical professionals we trust, probably brought in from outside Seattle, and we'd need to set up surveillance that could catch whoever responds to your apparent decline. Thompson has contacts in federal law enforcement who specialize in complex fraud cases. If we can demonstrate that someone is attempting to manipulate charitable foundation assets through murder, that becomes a federal crime with serious resources behind the investigation. They spent the evening developing their plan. Alexandra would return to Seattle claiming her health was deteriorating, that the stress of recent events had triggered new cardiac episodes. Each of her inner circle would be given slightly different information about her condition and treatment, allowing them to identify who had access to which details if those details were later used against her. I don't like this plan, Marcus admitted as they sat on the porch watching Emma play with the dog in the twilight. Too many things could go wrong. I don't like it either, but Marcus, we can't live in hiding forever. Emma deserves a normal life, not a childhood spent running from shadows and threats. If we're going to build the family we've talked about, we need to eliminate the dangers that would constantly threaten our peace. Emma had convinced the dog to lie down beside her on the grass, and she was using his golden fur as a pillow while she looked up at the stars. Are you and Dad going to get married? She asked suddenly, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet evening air. The question caught both adults off guard. They'd been so focused on survival and safety that they hadn't discussed the romantic feelings that had been growing between them. Would you like that? Alexandra asked carefully. I think Mom would want Dad to be happy. And I think she'd want me to have someone who loves me like a mom would. Emma sat up, her expression serious in the dim light. You do love us, don't you? More than I ever thought possible, Alexandra said, her voice thick with emotion. And Dad loves you too, even though he's scared to say it because he doesn't want to feel like he's forgetting Mom. Marcus felt tears form in his eyes at his daughter's perceptiveness. Emma said, how did you get so wise? Mom used to tell me that love doesn't get smaller when you share it with more people, it gets bigger. She said that if something ever happened to her, she wanted us to find new people to love, not because we stopped missing her, but because she taught us how good love can be. Alexandra moved to sit beside Emma on the grass, and Marcus joined them, creating a small circle under the Montana stars. Your mom sounds like she was an incredible woman. She was. And she would have loved you, Alexandra. She would have seen that you're trying to help people, and that you make Dad smile the way he used to before she got sick. They sat together in comfortable silence, each processing the conversation and its implications. Marcus realized that Emma was right about everything. Lisa would have wanted him to find love again, would have embraced someone who brought joy back into their lives. And Alexandra had become so much more than someone they were helping. She'd become the missing piece of their family. Alexandra, Marcus said quietly, when this is over, when we've caught whoever's been trying to hurt you, and Emma is safe, I'd like to talk about the future. Our future together. I'd like that too. Emma grinned and threw her arms around both of them. Good, because I already told the dog that we were going to be a real family, and I don't want him to think I was lying. The next morning brought a call from Thompson with news that would accelerate their timeline. Chen, we've intercepted communications suggesting that someone is planning another attempt on Alexandra's life. The surveillance indicates coordination between multiple parties, including at least one person with current access to the Montana property. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Someone here at the ranch. We're not certain, but we're seeing encrypted communications originating from the local area. It could be a staff member, a service provider, or someone who's infiltrated the security perimeter. Either way, your location is no longer secure. Alexandra made the decision immediately. We're returning to Seattle tonight. If someone's tracking us here, we're putting Emma in more danger by staying than by confronting the threat directly. Dad, Emma said, looking up from her breakfast with the calm acceptance she'd developed over the past weeks, are we going to catch the bad guys today? Marcus looked at his daughter, at Alexandra, at the life they'd built together in this peaceful place that was no longer safe. Yes, Em, today we're going to end this once and for all. As they prepared to leave the ranch, Marcus realized that their family had been forged not just by love but by shared courage. They'd faced every challenge together, and they would face whatever came next the same way. Emma's wisdom, Alexandra's determination, and his own protective instincts had created something stronger than any individual threat. The final confrontation was approaching, but Marcus no longer felt afraid. They had each other, they had a plan, and they had the unshakable certainty that their love was worth fighting for. Whatever happened in Seattle, they would face it as a family, united in purpose and committed to the future they'd chosen together. The Seattle mansion felt different when they returned, charged with tension and the weight of unfinished business. Emma held Marcus's hand tightly as they walked through rooms that had once felt like sanctuary, but now seemed filled with shadows and secrets. Alexandra moved with careful purpose, her apparent frailty part of the performance they'd rehearsed during the flight from Montana. Remember, Marcus whispered to Emma as they settled into the guest wing. Alexandra is pretending to be sicker than she really is. We need to act worried, but not scared, okay? Emma nodded solemnly. I can do that, Dad. I'm good at pretending when I have to be. Within hours of their arrival, the responses began exactly as they'd predicted. Dr. Sterling called personally, insisting on an immediate examination. Margaret Walsh appeared with flowers and concerned inquiries about Alexandra's medication schedule. James Crawford recommended additional security measures given her vulnerable condition. Thompson had positioned surveillance equipment throughout the house, invisible cameras and microphones that would record every interaction. Federal agents were stationed in unmarked vehicles throughout the neighborhood, ready to respond at the first sign of danger. Dr. Sterling is here, Margaret announced, her voice carrying the perfect note of professional concern mixed with personal worry. Alexandra lay propped against pillows in her bedroom, looking pale and fragile in a silk nightgown that emphasized her apparent weakness. Marcus sat beside her bed while Emma played quietly in the corner, both maintaining the illusion of a family dealing with renewed medical crisis. Dr. Sterling entered with his medical bag, and the authoritative manner that had made Alexandra trust him for years. He was distinguished and silver-haired, radiating the confidence that came with decades of medical practice, and the respect of Seattle's elite community. Alexandra, I'm so sorry to hear about this setback. The stress of recent events must have been overwhelming for your system. As he began his examination, Marcus watched carefully for any signs of the calculating mind behind the concerned facade. Dr. Sterling's hands were steady as he checked Alexandra's pulse, but his eyes held an intensity that seemed more focused on assessment than compassion. Your heart rate is quite elevated, the doctor murmured, reaching into his bag for what appeared to be medication. I think we should adjust your Digitalis dosage to help stabilize your rhythm. The moment had arrived. Marcus tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but Alexandra played her role perfectly, accepting the medication with the trust of a long-term patient. What Dr. Sterling didn't know was that Thompson's team had already switched out all medications in the house with harmless placebos. Doctor, Emma said suddenly from her corner, her voice small and worried, is Alexandra going to be okay? She seems so much sicker than before. Dr. Sterling turned to Emma with a practiced smile. Don't worry, sweetheart. Sometimes people have to get a little worse before they get better. But I'm going to take very good care of Alexandra. The words were meant to be reassuring, but Marcus heard something else underneath them: satisfaction. Anticipation. The tone of someone whose plans were finally reaching fruition. Dr. Sterling, Alexandra said weakly. I've been thinking about the foundation. If my health continues to decline, I worry about whether Marcus will be able to handle such enormous responsibility. Perhaps you could advise him, help guide the medical research grants. The doctor's eyes sharpened with interest. Of course, Alexandra. It would be my honor to help ensure the Foundation's resources are directed toward the most promising research opportunities. Marcus felt a chill at the eager way Dr. Sterling accepted the offer. This wasn't about money alone. This was about control over billions of dollars in medical research funding, the power to direct scientific inquiry toward projects that would benefit the doctor's own interests. After Dr. Sterling left, promising to return the following day to monitor Alexandra's condition, they gathered in the study to review the surveillance footage. Thompson's team had captured everything, including audio that revealed the doctor's true thoughts once he believed he was alone. The dosage should accelerate the process, they heard him say into his phone as he walked to his car. She'll be gone within a week, and then we can begin redirecting the research grants toward our pharmaceutical partnerships. $12 billion will revolutionize our profit margins. Emma looked up from her coloring book with the serious expression she wore when processing adult complications. He's been making Alexandra sick so he can steal money meant to help other sick people. That's exactly right, sweetheart, Alexandra said, her voice stronger now that the performance was over. He's been using his position as my doctor to slowly poison me while pretending to treat my heart condition. That's extra mean. He was supposed to help you get better, not make you worse. Thompson entered the study with federal agents who had been monitoring the entire operation. We have enough evidence for arrest and prosecution. Dr. Sterling's phone conversations included detailed discussions about manipulating Foundation assets, plus his medical records show a pattern of prescribing unnecessary medications to wealthy patients. Marcus felt a weight lifting from his chest that he hadn't realized had been there. It's really over. The immediate threat is over. Dr. Sterling will be arrested tonight, along with his pharmaceutical partners who were expecting to benefit from the Foundation manipulation. Helen Morrison will be cleared of all charges, and the real evidence of Dr. Sterling's activities will be turned over to the medical board. Alexandra stood up from her performance pose, stretching muscles that had been tensed with the effort of appearing frail. What about the surveillance equipment in Helen's greenhouse? Dr. Sterling installed it 6 months ago, using his access to the house during your medical appointments. He was monitoring Helen's gardening activities, so he could replicate the growing conditions needed for the poisonous plants, then frame her when the poisoning was discovered. Emma had been listening to the adult conversation with the focused attention she gave to all important information. So Dr. Sterling was pretending to be nice while really being the worst kind of bad guy. Unfortunately, yes. But Emma, because you helped us figure out that the bad person had to be someone close to Alexandra, we were able to catch him before he could hurt anyone else. Good. People who hurt others when they're supposed to help them should go to jail forever. That evening, after Dr. Sterling had been arrested and the federal agents had finished processing the evidence, they sat together in the mansion's living room feeling something they hadn't experienced in weeks: peace, safety, the certainty that they could build their future without looking over their shoulders for hidden threats. So what happens now? Marcus asked, watching Emma play with a puzzle on the coffee table while Alexandra reviewed Foundation documents on her laptop. Now we start living the life we've been planning instead of just surviving day to day, Alexandra replied. The Foundation becomes fully operational. Emma starts at her new school, and we figure out what it means to be a normal family that happens to control enormous charitable resources. Will we stay here in Seattle? For now, Emma needs stability, and the Foundation work requires us to be accessible to the organizations we're funding. But Marcus, I want you to know that wherever we live, whatever we do, the most important thing is that we're together. Emma looked up from her puzzle with a grin that reminded Marcus of Lisa's smile. Does this mean we can finally have the wedding? I already picked out a dress for when you and Dad get married. Marcus felt his face warm with embarrassment and joy. Emma, we haven't even talked about getting married yet. But you love each other, and we're already a family, so getting married is just making it official, right? Emma's logic was unassailable in its simplicity. Alexandra laughed, the sound free and joyful in a way Marcus had never heard before. Emma, would you like to help plan a wedding? Can we have it here at the house, and can we plant a garden afterward to celebrate? I think that sounds perfect. Marcus looked around the room at the two people who had become his entire world, feeling a contentment he'd never expected to experience again. The simple act of helping a stranger had led them all to something infinitely more valuable than money or security. They'd found each other, chosen each other, and built something real from the wreckage of their individual losses. 6 months later they stood in the mansion's garden surrounded by friends, foundation staff, and the few family members who truly mattered. Emma served as maid of honor, her dress the same shade of blue as the flowers they'd planted together. Helen Morrison officiated the ceremony, her voice warm with the affection she'd developed for the unusual family that had brought joy back into the house she'd maintained for so many years. Do you, Marcus Chen, take Alexandra to be your wife, promising to love and protect her, to share in her joys and support her through challenges, and to build a life together based on compassion, generosity and commitment to helping others? Marcus looked into Alexandra's eyes, seeing not the frightened woman he'd found on a stormy night, but his partner in every sense of the word. I do. Do you, Alexandra Whitmore, take Marcus to be your husband, promising to love and cherish him, to support his dreams and share in his responsibilities, and to build a family together that honors both the past you've lost and the future you're creating? I do. Emma stepped forward with the rings, her face shining with happiness. Now you're officially married, and we're officially a real family. As Marcus kissed his new wife, he could hear Emma cheering and Helen crying happy tears. In the distance, the first grants from the Whitmore Foundation were already at work, funding cancer research, building community centers, and providing scholarships for children who needed the same kind of second chances that had brought their family together. The foundation had distributed over $2 billion in its first year, helping thousands of families facing medical crises, educational barriers and economic hardships. Emma had started a program that paired wealthy children with kids from underprivileged backgrounds, teaching both groups about compassion and community responsibility. That night, as they stood on the porch looking out at the garden they'd planted together, Marcus marveled at the journey that had brought them here. A chance encounter during a medical emergency had become a love story that changed not just their lives but the lives of countless people who would benefit from their commitment to using wealth for healing rather than harm. No regrets? Alexandra asked, leaning against his shoulder as they watched Emma chase fireflies across the lawn. Only that we didn't find each other sooner. I don't know. I think we found each other exactly when we were supposed to. When we were both ready to choose love over fear, generosity over greed, family over solitude. Emma ran up to them, breathless and glowing with exertion. Dad, Alexandra, look. She opened her cupped hands to reveal a firefly, its gentle light pulsing in the darkness. I caught one, but I'm going to let it go because fireflies are meant to be free to shine wherever they want. As the tiny light disappeared into the night sky, Marcus understood that Emma had captured something profound about their own journey. They'd all been trapped in their own kinds of darkness, but finding each other had set them free to shine in ways they'd never imagined possible. The simple act of stopping to help a stranger had led to love, family, and the power to change the world. Sometimes the most extraordinary transformations began with the most ordinary choices to care about someone else's well-being. In helping Alexandra, Marcus had discovered that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars but in the depth of connections between people who chose to take care of each other. Their story had begun with a medical emergency and a prescription delivery that changed everything. It ended with a family united by love, committed to each other, and dedicated to ensuring that their good fortune became a source of hope and healing for anyone who needed a second chance at happiness. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.